They say fire is a living thing, that it breathes, feeds, grows, that it has hunger and rage and an insatiable need to consume everything in its path. I used to think that was just poetry, the kind of romantic nonsense people spouted about forces they didn't understand. 23 years as a firefighter taught me that fire was chemistry, nothing more. Oxygen, fuel, heat. Remove any one element and the triangle collapses. Simple science. I was wrong. Fire is alive. I know this now because I've become it. My name is Marcus Kane, and I used to save people from flames. Now I use flames to save people from monsters. The kind of monsters who wear badges and sit in city council meetings and shake hands with grieving widowers while their pockets are full of blood money. The kind of monsters who killed my family and thought they'd gotten away with it. It's been 14 months since the fire. 14 months since I stood outside the smoldering ruins of my home at 3:47 a.m., watching my entire world turn to ash while my captain held me back from running into the inferno. 14 months since I learned that all my training, all my experience, all my knowledge of fire and rescue meant nothing when the flames were already inside, already consuming the only things that mattered. Sarah, Emma, little Jake, my wife of 12 years, my 8-year-old daughter who wanted to be a veterinarian, my 5-year-old son who was afraid of the dark but never afraid of anything else. They died in their sleep, the coroner said. Smoke inhalation got them before the flames did. He meant it as comfort, I think. Quick and painless, he assured me. They never knew what was happening, but I knew. God help me. I knew exactly what was happening from the moment I got the call. I knew because I'd seen 100 house fires, and I'd never seen one move that fast, burn that hot, spread with that kind of deliberate precision. I knew because the scorch patterns were wrong, the burn sequence was wrong, everything about it screamed accelerant and intent and murder. But knowing and proving are different things, and the official investigation was a masterpiece of willful blindness. Electrical fire, Detective Ray Morrison concluded after what he generously called a thorough investigation. Old wiring, probably sparked in the basement? These things happen, Marcus. I'm sorry for your loss. Old wiring. In a house I'd personally rewired 3 years earlier. In a house I'd installed smoke detectors in every room, carbon monoxide detectors on every floor, fire extinguishers in the kitchen and garage. In a house where I'd taught my children fire safety since they were old enough to walk. But Morrison wasn't interested in those details. Neither was Fire Marshal Thompson, who rubber-stamped the electrical theory without so much as examining the basement where the spark supposedly originated. Neither was Chief Williams, who patted my shoulder and told me sometimes tragedies just happen, even to the best-prepared families. It took me 6 months to uncover the truth. 6 months of digging through public records, following paper trails, connecting dots that the official investigation had deliberately ignored. 6 months of grief turning slowly into something harder, sharper, more focused. The fire wasn't random. It was a message. 3 weeks before my family died, I'd responded to a warehouse fire on the east side. Routine call, or so it seemed. Big old building, full of what the owner claimed was textile merchandise. But something was off about the burn patterns, off about the way the fire had spread, off about the owner's nervous insistence that we focus on containment rather than investigation. I'd written it up in my report, suspected arson, possible insurance fraud, recommended a full investigation. That report disappeared, along with my photos of the scene, along with the statement I'd given to Detective Morrison about the suspicious circumstances. The warehouse owner, Vincent Torino, collected a $2 million insurance payout 6 weeks later. No investigation, no questions asked, just a check and a handshake, and a case closed before it was ever really opened. I kept digging. Torino's warehouse wasn't the first. Over the past 5 years, there had been 17 similar fires, 17 buildings owned by a network of shell companies and front businesses, 17 insurance payouts totaling over $30 million. 17 investigations that went nowhere, rubber-stamped by the same officials, buried by the same system, and at the center of it all a conspiracy so elegant in its simplicity that I almost admired it. Detective Morrison handled the investigations, ensuring evidence disappeared and witnesses stayed quiet. Fire Marshal Thompson provided the official reports, blessing obvious arson as accidental fires. Chief Williams managed the fire department response, making sure his crews focused on containment rather than investigation. City Councilman Bradley approved the insurance claims through his position on the Municipal Oversight Committee. Insurance adjuster Helen Park expedited the payouts, asking no uncomfortable questions. Attorney Michael Cross handled the legal paperwork, creating the shell companies and managing the money trail. 6 people, 6 signatures on my family's death warrant. Because somewhere in my investigation, I'd gotten too close to something they couldn't let me see. Someone had decided that Marcus Kane, veteran firefighter and inconvenient truth-teller, needed to be dealt with. Not killed. That would raise questions, but broken. Destroyed from the inside out. They couldn't have known that killing my family wouldn't break me. It would rebuild me into something else entirely. Something that burns. I spent 8 months planning. 8 months studying each of them, learning their routines, their weaknesses, their fears. 8 months becoming someone else, someone who could smile at my captain's retirement party while mentally calculating the burn time of the restaurant's kitchen grease trap. Someone who could nod sympathetically at Morrison's complaints about his ex-wife while noting that he smoked in bed when he'd been drinking. Someone who understood that justice delayed isn't justice denied, it's justice refined. Detective Ray Morrison was first. The beauty of being a firefighter is that people trust you completely. When Marcus Kane shows up at your door in uniform, expressing concern about a gas leak reported in your neighborhood, you don't question it. You let him into your basement to check your connections. You stand there chatting about the weather while he examines your heating system with professional thoroughness. You don't notice when he loosens a fitting, just slightly, just enough. Morrison's house exploded at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Natural gas leak, the investigators concluded. Faulty connection in the basement heating system. These old houses, you know. Poor maintenance, tragic accident. I was first on scene, of course. Part of the crew that tried valiantly to save Detective Morrison from the flames that consumed his bedroom. We found him in his bed, overcome by smoke before the explosion's flames could reach him. Quick and painless, the coroner said. Just like my family. Fire Marshal Thompson took longer. His death needed to look different, unconnected to Morrison's. Variety is important when you're establishing a pattern of accidents rather than murders. Thompson was a creature of habit. Every Sunday morning, he worked in his garage, restoring a 1967 Mustang that would never run properly no matter how much money he threw at it. He used chemical paint strippers, acetone, all sorts of volatile solvents, dangerous stuff in an enclosed space. All it took was a tiny spark, a wire I'd loosened in his radio, creating an intermittent short. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would leave evidence. Just a small electrical fault that would arc at random moments. I knew he'd be listening to the game that Sunday. I knew he'd have the garage door closed to keep the noise down. I knew he'd been drinking. He always drank when his team was losing. The spark came during the fourth quarter. Thompson's garage went up like a bomb, taking him with it. Accidental fire, the investigation concluded. Improper storage of flammable materials. Poor ventilation. These things happen when people get careless. 2 down, 4 to go. Chief Williams presented a challenge. As a fire official himself, he was naturally cautious about fire safety. His house was a fortress of smoke detectors and sprinkler systems. He didn't smoke, rarely drank, maintained his property meticulously. But he had a weakness, his cabin up north. Every other weekend he'd disappear to his hunting lodge in the mountains, a rustic place he'd inherited from his father. No modern safety systems there, just a wood-burning stove, propane lanterns, and 40-year-old wiring. Williams prided himself on being a woodsman, on living simply when he escaped to the mountains. He heated with split logs, cooked on a wood-burning stove, read by lamplight. Very romantic, very traditional, very flammable. I'd visited the cabin once, years ago, for a department party. I remembered the layout, the quirks of the old building, the way the floorboards creaked near the kitchen, the way the stovepipe passed close to the wooden beam that supported the loft where William slept. It took 3 trips to prepare everything, 3 separate weekends of hiking in the area, slowly gathering intelligence, making modifications. A loose connection in the stovepipe allowing carbon monoxide to leak into the loft. A weakened beam, ready to fail under heat stress. Some old newspapers stuffed into the wall cavity near the stove. When Williams arrived for his weekend retreat, everything was ready. The fire started Saturday night, while he slept off a bottle of bourbon in the loft. Carbon monoxide got him first. He never felt the flames that consumed the cabin. By the time the volunteer fire department arrived from town, there was nothing left but ash and charred timber. Accidental fire, they ruled. Faulty stovepipe. Carbon monoxide poisoning followed by structural collapse. These old cabins are death traps, they said. People don't respect the danger of wood heating. Williams's memorial service was beautiful. Half the fire department attended. I gave a eulogy about his dedication to public safety, his commitment to protecting others. I spoke with tears in my eyes about losing a mentor, a friend, a man who dedicated his life to fighting the very thing that killed him. Every word was true. Every word was a lie. The irony wasn't lost on me, a firefighter using fire to destroy the people who destroyed his life. There's poetry in that, I think. Justice in the symmetry. But poetry doesn't resurrect dead children. Justice doesn't bring back murdered wives. City Councilman Bradley was next, and his death required more creativity. Politicians are public figures, their movements tracked, their deaths scrutinized. I needed something that would look completely natural, beyond suspicion. Bradley had a weakness for expensive cigars and aged whiskey. Every Thursday night, he held court at Malone's Steakhouse, smoking Cuban cigars and making deals with local businessmen. The restaurant tolerated his violations of the smoking ban because Bradley controlled their liquor license. Corruption has so many faces. I'd worked part-time at Malone's during my early years with the fire department, picking up extra shifts as a barback. I knew the building, knew the kitchen, knew that the ventilation system in Bradley's private dining room had been jury-rigged to accommodate his cigars. The beauty of restaurants is that they're full of ignition sources. Gas burners, electrical equipment, hot oils, open flames. So many ways for accidents to happen. I visited Malone's on a busy Friday night, just another customer having dinner alone. While the staff was overwhelmed with the rush, I slipped into the back corridor where the utility panels were located. A few quick adjustments to the ventilation system's electrical connections. Nothing dramatic, just enough to create an overload when the system worked hardest. Thursday night, Bradley was holding court as usual, smoking his cigars, making his deals, breathing in the same corruption that had killed my family. The ventilation system was working overtime, trying to clear the illegal smoke from his private room. At 10:23 p.m., the overloaded circuit sparked. The spark ignited lint and grease that had accumulated in the ductwork over years of poor maintenance. The fire spread through the ventilation system like a fuse, emerging in Bradley's dining room as a jet of flame that engulfed his table. He died clutching his cigar, his expensive suit melting to his skin, his last breath full of the smoke that had defined his corruption. The restaurant was evacuated. 16 people suffered smoke inhalation, but only Bradley died. Accidental fire, the investigation concluded. Electrical fault in an overloaded ventilation system, poor maintenance practices. These things happen in old buildings. I was part of the crew that responded. I helped carry out the injured, including Bradley's dinner companions who were traumatized but alive. I performed CPR on the councilman himself, though we both knew he was already gone. Professional dedication, they called it. Going above and beyond for a man who'd helped murder my family. If they only knew. 2 left, insurance adjuster Helen Park and attorney Michael Cross. The enablers, the ones who'd made the money flow smoothly. who'd provided the legal framework for my family's murder. Park was almost too easy. She lived alone in a converted warehouse loft, one of those trendy downtown spaces with exposed brick and industrial fixtures. Very modern, very stylish, very poorly wired by contractors who prioritized aesthetics over safety. Park had a habit of falling asleep with her laptop plugged in beside her bed, the power cord stretched across her bedroom to reach the only convenient outlet. She'd complained about it to friends. I'd overheard her at the coffee shop where she met clients, talking about how she needed to call an electrician to install a proper outlet. She never made that call. I visited her building on a Saturday afternoon, posing as a city electrical inspector following up on a complaint about power fluctuations in the area. The building super let me in without question, even helped me access the electrical panels. Public trust is a wonderful thing when you're wearing the right uniform. Park's loft was a fire trap waiting to happen. Space heaters plugged into extension cords, overloaded outlets, cheap power strips daisy-chained together. I didn't need to create a hazard, I just needed to make an existing one worse. A small adjustment to her bedroom outlet, a loose connection that would arc intermittently, heating up the old wiring inside the walls. Nothing that would trigger the circuit breaker, nothing that would be immediately dangerous. Just a slow-building fault that would worsen over time. It took 3 weeks for the connection to fail completely. 3 weeks of increasing resistance, growing heat, old insulation slowly charring inside the walls. Park probably noticed her bedroom outlet getting warm, probably meant to call an electrician. She died in her sleep on a Wednesday night, overcome by smoke before the flames broke through the wall. Her laptop was found melted to her nightstand. The power cord burned through where it had stretched across her bedroom. Electrical fire, they concluded. Faulty outlet in old wiring. These converted buildings are notorious for electrical problems. Tragic accident. I was off duty when the call came in, but I responded anyway. Professional courtesy, I told the captain. Helen Park had processed my family's life insurance claim. She'd been nothing but kind and professional during that terrible time. The least I could do was help save her. We were too late, of course. The fire had progressed too far, done too much damage. But I tried. God knows I tried to reach her, even knowing she was already gone. They gave me a commendation for my efforts. Dedication above and beyond the call of duty. That left Michael Cross. The attorney was the most dangerous target because he was the smartest. Cross had built his career on understanding how systems worked, how to exploit their weaknesses, how to make problems disappear. If anyone would see through the pattern of accidents, it would be him. But intelligence can be a weakness too. Smart people think they can outthink everyone else. They get arrogant, overconfident, careless. Cross lived in a fortress of a house, gated community, security system, professionally installed fire suppression equipment, but he also owned a boat, a 40-foot yacht he kept at the marina. His weekend escape, his place to relax and forget about the dirty business that paid for his lifestyle. Boats are complicated machines, electrical systems, fuel lines, propane tanks, engine compartments full of heat and flammable vapors. So many things that can go wrong when you're miles from shore, surrounded by water that won't help you if the thing that's supposed to float starts burning instead. I spent weeks learning about Cross's boat, his habits, his weekend routines. He was predictable, like most successful people. Every Saturday morning, he'd take the yacht out for a few hours of fishing. Alone. Always alone. Cross didn't trust anyone enough to share his sanctuary. The marina was easy to access. Security cameras focused on the parking lot and main docks, but Cross's slip was in the older section where surveillance was spotty. I visited several times, posing as a potential boat buyer looking at vessels for sale. Just another middle-aged man living out his maritime fantasies. Cross's yacht was beautiful, expensive, meticulously maintained, the kind of floating palace that screamed success and power. It was also a bomb waiting for the right spark. The boat's propane system was professionally installed, regularly inspected, completely up to code. But propane systems are only as safe as their weakest connection, And even the best installations develop small leaks over time, usually harmless, a tiny amount of gas dispersing harmlessly into the atmosphere. But in an enclosed space, with the right conditions, even a small leak can become something more. I didn't sabotage Cross's propane system. I improved it, added a secondary regulator that would make the system safer, more reliable, the kind of upgrade any responsible boat owner would appreciate. Except my secondary regulator had a small flaw. A timer mechanism that would cause it to fail after precisely 72 hours of operation. Not dramatically, just enough to create a small leak in the engine compartment where propane could accumulate. Cross took his yacht out on a beautiful Saturday morning, 96 hours after I'd installed my improvement. The sun was shining, the water was calm, the conditions were perfect for a day of fishing and forgetting about the blood on his hands. He was 3 miles offshore when the engine compartment reached critical propane concentration. All it needed was a spark, the engine backfiring, a loose electrical connection, the automatic bilge pump kicking on. The explosion was visible from shore, a fireball rising from the water like a phoenix, bright enough to be seen for miles. Cross's yacht simply disappeared, vaporized in an instant of perfect justice. They found pieces of him scattered across a half-mile of ocean, not enough for a proper funeral, but enough for DNA identification. Accidental explosion, the Coast Guard concluded. Propane leak in the engine compartment. These things happen with marine propane systems. Tragic accident. I was first on scene with the fireboat crew, searching for survivors we knew we wouldn't find. Professional dedication, they said. Going above and beyond to save a man who couldn't be saved. If only they knew how far above and beyond I'd already gone. 6 deaths, 6 accidents, 6 perfect pieces of justice for the conspiracy that murdered my family. The insurance payout stopped. Without their network of corrupt officials, the arson ring collapsed. Torino and his associates found themselves under federal investigation as the FBI finally noticed the pattern of suspicious fires that local officials had ignored. Some of them went to prison. Others fled. A few committed suicide rather than face justice. Justice. That's what this was about, wasn't it? Not revenge, justice. The kind of justice that the system had failed to provide, that corrupt officials had actively prevented. I tell myself that every night as I sit in my empty house, surrounded by the ghosts of the family I couldn't save. Sarah's chair at the kitchen table, Emma's drawings still hanging on the refrigerator, Jake's toys scattered in the living room where I left them the morning they died. Some nights, I almost believe it. Some nights I can convince myself that I'm a force of righteous retribution, a guardian angel with a flamethrower, a man who stepped outside the law to serve a higher justice. Other nights, I know what I really am. A killer, a murderer, a man who used his knowledge and access to commit perfect crimes, who hid behind his uniform and reputation while systematically destroying the lives of 6 human beings. They were corrupt, yes. They were complicit in my family's murder, absolutely. But they were also people with families, with children, with lives and dreams and fears just like everyone else. Morrison had a daughter who just started college. Thompson was 3 months from retirement. Williams had grandchildren who adored him. Bradley's wife is still fighting the insurance company over his death benefits. Park's parents buried their only child. Cross left behind an ex-wife who still loved him despite their divorce. I destroyed all of that. Not just the 6 people who wronged me, but everyone connected to them. Circles of grief radiating outward like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. And for what? My family is still dead. Sarah and Emma and Jake are still ash and memory and regret. I still wake up every morning in an empty house, still go to bed every night surrounded by silence where there should be laughter. The corruption is gone, yes. The city is cleaner, safer, more honest than it was before I started my campaign of justice. But that's not why I did it, and I'm not noble enough to pretend otherwise. I did it because I wanted them to burn, because I needed them to know what it felt like to be consumed by something beyond their control. Because I was so consumed by grief and rage that I became the very thing I'd spent 23 years fighting. I became fire itself. Hungry. Destructive. consuming everything in my path. But fire burns everything, including the one who sets it. And now, sitting in this empty house with my memories and my guilt and my perfect crimes, I understand that I consume myself too. They call me a hero at the station. Marcus Kane, the firefighter who never gave up, who went above and beyond even after losing everything. They don't know that I've given up on everything that matters. They don't know that the man they think they know died in the same fire that took his family. What's left is something else. Something hollow and burned out and dangerous. Something that understands, finally, why they say fire is alive. Because I am fire now, and fire consumes everything it touches, including itself. The department wants me to retire, to take my pension, and try to build a new life somewhere else. They think I need healing, peace, a chance to move beyond the tragedy that destroyed my family. They're right, of course. But moving beyond would mean leaving Sarah and Emma and Jake behind, and I can't do that. I won't do that. Instead, I keep their memory alive the only way I know how. I sit at this kitchen table every night and remember their faces, their voices, their laughter. I tend the flame of grief and guilt and love that burns in my chest where my heart used to be. And I wait, because corruption is like fire. It spreads. New players move into the void left by the old ones. New conspiracies form. New innocent families get targeted by men who think they're untouchable. When that happens, and it will happen, they'll find out they're wrong. Fire never really dies. It just waits for the right conditions to burn again. And I am very good at creating the right conditions. My name is Marcus Kane. I used to save people from flames. Now I am the flame.